Today's material is a comprehensive documentary script exploring how the Israeli military is preparing for future conflicts by balancing advanced technological development with the urgent need for industrial and ammunition independence following October 7th. Let's dive right into the analysis. The narrative arc currently experiences thematic whiplash by rapidly shifting from a gritty examination of ammunition shortages to a glossy showcase of advanced military technology.
Yeah, I mean, you start reading this piece, and it effectively sets up this really profound crisis.
Right.
It shows in stark detail that the whole small and smart army concept basically failed on October 7th.
It puts you right there in the dirt with the logistics officers.
Exactly.
We're reading about ground forces crossing into Gaza with like only 150 shells per artillery piece.
Which is nothing. Right, and watching those numbers rapidly dwindle. You really feel the panic of that over-reliance on the $3.8 billion U.S. aid package.
A package that obviously comes with massive geopolitical strings attached.
Yeah, so it sets up this immense weight of a military machine running out of its most fundamental fuel, but then
it shifts. It feels a bit like starting a gritty true crime investigation about supply chain failures and halfway through stepping onto the set of a sci-fi action film.
yes, the transition into this extended catalog of high-tech marvels feels, well, really disconnected.
Suddenly we're getting a tour of the Iron Beam laser and autonomous AI drones and OFEC satellites.
Which are fascinating, sure, but putting them right after this desperate plea for basic artillery shells kind of dilutes the initial urgency of the industrial base crisis.
It makes the piece feel like two completely different documentaries spliced together, like a critical investigative report followed by a promotional technology showcase. So how do we bridge this gap without losing the fascinating technological detail?
So the suggestion here is to reframe the presentation of those advanced technological systems. They need to directly answer the economic and strategic vulnerabilities raised in the first act.
Use them to resolve the specific crises introduced earlier.
Exactly. Don't just present them as standalone marvels. Let's look at the Iron Beam laser defense system, for example, or Imagine Or.
Right now the text highlights its world-first status.
Yeah, and that it intercepts targets at the speed of light. It reads a bit like a manufacturer's brochure.
So how should they reframe it?
Well, the writer should explicitly contrast its infinite magazine and low cost per intercept against those specific supply chain bottlenecks we just read about.
Because the opening details the expensive interceptor shortages, right? Like the Arrow and Iron Dome?
Exactly. An Iron Dome interceptor is, around $200,000. Arrow missiles are in the millions.
And they're vulnerable to embargoes.
Right. So frame the Iron Beam, which runs on the domestic electrical grid for a few dollars a shot, as the ultimate solution to those exact budget constraints and foreign dependencies.
That makes so much sense, and I assume you take a similar approach with the Tsayad, the digital army system?
Definitely. The script spends a lot of time showing how it networks the battlefield, sharing coordinates from drones to tanks.
But again, in a vacuum.
Yeah. Frame it as a necessary force multiplier for the larger, more cumbersome ground army the script argues is now required.
Right. Directly addressing that large and smart thesis proposed at the beginning.
Because a massive army is inherently unwieldy, the writer should frame Tsayad as the digital central nervous system that prevents this new massive force from collapsing into chaos.
So fixing the internal supply chain and command structure brings us inevitably to the external factors. The examination of the defense relationship with the United States focuses too narrowly on the constraints of American aid while overlooking the reciprocal geopolitical leverage that complicates the concept of total independence.
Yeah, the material makes a really compelling argument for building a robust domestic defense industrial base to counter embargoes.
It cites those instances where U.S. shipments of heavy bombs were delayed, impacting operations in Rafah.
Right, but it portrays the multi-billion-dollar aid package largely as just a financial crutch that eroded domestic production lines.
Like dropping the lobby fighter project or stopping local shell manufacturing.
Exactly. It ignores the diplomatic and strategic shielding that comes with deep interoperability with the U.S. It makes the proposed solution of cutting the cord seem vastly simpler than the geopolitical reality allows.
So the suggestion is to deepen the analysis by introducing the counterarguments and diplomatic risks associated with true arms independence. Defense procurement is as much about political alliances as it is about economic efficiency.
Right.
But wait, The text explicitly states you can't have both total independence and total excellence. I mean, if you try to build your own fighter jets and helicopters, you ruin education and healthcare. Doesn't the script already acknowledge this limitation?
Well, it acknowledges the economic limitations, yeah. But acknowledging economic limitations is different from acknowledging diplomatic realities.
Okay, I see.
To do that, the writer should expand on the passing mention of Israel's exports to the U.S.
Like the Trophy Active Protection System or Windbreaker?
Yeah, and spike missiles. Detail how exporting these 18 to 20 critical defense items actually buys political capital and influence in Washington.
Proving that the relationship is interdependent rather than purely dependent.
Exactly. And then explore the hypothetical diplomatic fallout. If the military stops purchasing U.S. platforms to achieve this independence advocated for in the script, how might that impact the diplomatic umbrella provided at international forums like the UN?
Like if American planners aren't invested in the Israeli defense architect, do U.S. diplomats still use their veto power?
Right. Incorporate that tension. Buying a squadron of F-35s isn't just about stealth capabilities, it's about locking in a UN Security Council veto.
That makes the argument far more robust, which leads us to the strategic doctrine. The debate surrounding the establishment of a dedicated missile corps is presented primarily as a bureaucratic turf war, missing the opportunity to explore how this fundamentally alters regional deterrence.
Yeah, the script outlines this really fascinating argument between relying on Air Force jets versus ground-launched missiles.
Jets require incredibly expensive engines, vulnerable runways, and hours to mobilize.
While ground-launched missiles are cheaper, completely decentralized, and offer an immediate response, but it frames this mostly as an organizational issue.
Like whether the Air Force or the ground forces should press the button.
Right. This narrows the scope of the discussion. It fails to connect this tactical shift back to the psychology of regional enemies, who were described earlier in the material as a wounded animal seeking revenge.
So the suggestion is to elevate the missile course discussion by linking it back to the opening theme of concept failure, illustrating how immediate, decentralized strike capabilities actively rewrite the strategic calculus of a multi-front war.
Exact. Instead of just comparing the financial cost of an F-35 engine to a missile booster, emphasize the operational psychology using the Syria example provided in the text.
Okay.
Contrast the 1 to 2 hour Air Force mobilization time against a 4-minute ballistic missile response using systems like LoRa or Predator Hawk.
So detailing how those saved 116 minutes change an enemy's willingness to even attempt maneuvering forces.
Yes. It paralyzes them. And connect this back to October 7th. Frame the decentralization of heavy firepower to battalion commanders, like with organic mortars and tactical missiles, as a direct cure to the centralized command bottlenecks that failed during the surprise attack.
Right. As I understand it from the notes, the argument here is that the Air Force is essentially a highly expensive flying missile launcher, but is there a risk that stripping the Air Force of this long-range role might fragment the military's overall strategic command during a crisis?
That is exactly the friction the audience will be sensing, and the script must address it directly by bringing the technology and the doctrine together.
Okay, how?
By utilizing the Tizaya system as the mechanism of control. The writer must show that the digital network is the leash that keeps this decentralized power cohesive.
So a battalion commander can launch a tactical missile instant because the Tizaya network provides a real-time, synchronized picture to both the local commander and the general staff.
Right. This ensures that an immediate localized strike inherently aligns with the broader strategic command.
That perfectly plies to tragedy of the centralized failure, decentralized missile, and the technological safeguard into one narrative thread.
It really does.
Well, that brings us to the end of our analysis. Let's briefly recap the 3 actionable takeaways for our listener. 1. Thematically link the high-tech systems to the initial supply chain crisis to maintain narrative tension.
2. Broaden the critique of U.S. military aid to include the complexities of diplomatic leverage.
And 3. Elevate the missile corps debate from a logistical argument into a profound shift in deterrence doctrine. We warmly invite you to apply these structural and thematic adjustments to your script and submit the revised work back to the critique for a future review.